Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today it's the first week of GarbAugust and I've read a boatload of trash. So yes, we are nearly at the end of the first week of GarbAugust and I've been having a blast so far. I've really enjoyed the books that I've read. They haven't all been fantastic by any means, but I've had a really good time reading them. GarbAugust, if you don't know, is the annual reading event I run that celebrates the joy of trashy books. So that kind of undemanding commercial fiction which educators and critics might turn their noses up at, but which is pure fun to read. There are a load of co-hosts for the event. I will leave links to their channels in the description to the video. Do check them out. There's some fantastic GarbAugust content that's gone up this week. So check out their channels, check out their videos, give them a subscribe if you're not subscribed already. It's been a really great week so far, and as much as I've enjoyed reading the books, I've also really enjoyed watching other people's content. Before I get into the meat of the video though, I just wanted to make a quick kind of public service announcement, which is on something completely unconnected. So if you haven't seen, I did put up a post about this on my community tab the other day. Jason Arnott, the author, is going through a very difficult time at the moment. So Jason wrote a fantastic novel called The Last Days of Jack Sparks, which I've seen many people, review really praisingly. It's a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. He wrote another book called Ghosted, which was good as well, and a fantastic short story called A Sincere Warning About the Entity in Your Home, which is one of the creepiest short stories I've ever read. Jason was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer recently. He is in the UK, so he's covered by the NHS, but he needs to get treated really, really quickly. So he's set up a GoFundMe to try and raise money to get that treatment. I think he's just hit his first goal, but there is a lot more that he needs to fund. So please do, if you've got a bit of spare cash, do consider sending him some money. I'll leave a link to his GoFundMe in the description to the video. He's a really lovely guy. We've chatted over email in the past. He's a great guy, and it's really horrible to see him going through this. Okay, so let's get into the books then. As I said, I've got a lot of books to talk about. I think I've managed to tick off 14 squares on the Garbingo card this week. I've read a lot. All of this stuff was, undemanding. These weren't difficult books to read, and I think that's why I've managed to read quite as much as I have. I've had quite a lot of free time this week as well. So I'll talk through the books. This first week of GarbAugust, as you may remember, was Anything Goes week. It runs up until the end of Sunday, so next Monday, Monday coming, we kick off week 2, which is shock value. So reading books which are, sold on the promise of containing salacious detail or extreme violence. But yeah, week 1, anything goes. Just read anything you want that is trashy, and I've certainly done that. So I'll go through the books in order. So the first one, and then when I've finished, I'll go through the Garbingo card with you and show you what squares I think I've ticked off. So the first thing I read then was this Ghost Train by Gail Richards. So this is one of the People's Friend pocket novels that I had picked up from a charity shop a while ago. So these are published like magazines in that I think you subscribe and you get like 2 of them a month. They've definitely, look like magazines with that kind of advert on the back and things like that, but they are short novels. This was fun. It was kind of a mystery, kind of a romance. It was really sweet. It was quite cosy and, not challenging by any means, but I did enjoy it. It had a nice central relationship at the heart of it and a couple of mysteries going on in it as well. So that was fun. I then read Robocop II, the novelisation by Ed Naha. Robocop II, not my favourite Robocop film, which is, definitely Robocop. Robocop I think is a phenomenal film. Robocop II, not quite so good, but it was fun reading the novelisation. It did have an incredibly schmaltzy ending. I don't remember if the film had that or not, but it has this kind of family moment at the end with Murphy, which was just super, super cheesy. But yeah, the actual book was pretty fun. You've got some of the kind of trademark Robocop satire in there, and you've got some decent action sequences as well. So that was quite entertaining. I then read one of the 2 group reads that we're doing. So we've got 2 group reads for GarbAugust this year. The first of those is Zoo by James Patterson and Michael Ledwidge. The other one is Rivals by Jilly Cooper, which I'll talk about a bit later as well. So I think people have had like mixed responses to this book, it would be fair to say. I know that Crystal from Fibre Artsy absolutely hated it. I thought it was okay. It was an incredibly quick read, despite being nearly 500 pages long. Those pages are like, they've got very wide spacing on the line spacing is super wide, the margins are big, the print's quite big. It was very, very dumb, but it was entertaining. It's a bit like one of those like Sci-Fi Channel stupid monster movie type type films. It's that kind of level of literature. So it's the concept is that all the mammals in the world go mad and start attacking people, and there's this guy who's a scientist who's kind of been cast out from the scientific community because he's been banging on about the threat of this rages and no one else believes him. So he feels vindicated when it happens. And it was okay. It definitely kept me turning the pages. The actual explanation for why this has happened, I thought was quite interesting. But it's just a really, really dumb book. It was entertaining, but stupid. I've come to the conclusion that the secret to James Patterson's success, and I might make a separate video about this, is if you think about when you are reading a book, particularly like a thriller style book, there's this balance, isn't there, between how much do you want to know what's going to happen and how difficult is it to turn the pages in the book. And I think what James Patterson does is his books aren't necessarily that thrilling. So that level of, how much do you want to find out what's going to happen isn't necessarily that high, but it's always higher than how difficult it is to read the book because the books are stupidly easy to read. So yeah, a very silly book, but it was fun. I then went straight into another James Patterson book, which, given that a while ago I made a video, quite a long time ago actually, I made a video called Why I Hate James Patterson, may raise a few eyebrows, but I did have another James Patterson book on the list for this month, and that was this one, The President is Missing by Bill Clinton, ex-president, and James Patterson. So this is, I think there's 3 books in this series now that Clinton and Patterson have supposedly written together. And like Zoo, this was a very silly thriller that manages to be easier to read than it is like stupid, basically. So again, it kept me turning the pages. So the concept here is that the president of the US has been, he's like, it starts quite interesting actually. So it starts with him apparently going up in front of like a congressional committee, which, given what happened to Clinton, I thought was an interesting choice, where he's getting quizzed about some dealings he supposedly had with this terrorist. And as the plot develops, you discover why he's doing that. There's this kind of big threat to the US that he's trying to stop, and only he can stop it, and he can't let other people in on the secret, etc., etc. So it was like completely implausible in terms of the concept that a president would actually act like that and wouldn't have an army of people supporting him on something. But it was, reasonably gripping, and I flew through it in a day, I think. So yeah, it was a fun enough read. After that, back to a favourite series of mine, the Executioner series. So I read book 26 in that. Which is Acapulco Rampage by Don Pendleton. So this series of books is about Mac Bolan, the executioner, going up against the mafia. In every book, he goes to a different place and he kills some mafia people who are there. In this book, he went to Acapulco and killed some mafia people who were there. That's basically all you need to know about the book. Very silly, but a lot of fun. I do enjoy these books. They are fun, light entertainment. They kind of tap into my love of like stupid 80s action movies. It's that kind of a vibe. So yeah, that was fun. After that, probably the only kind of big surprise of the week. All the books I've talked about so far were kind of pretty much exactly what I was expecting. This book was not what I was expecting at all. And it was actually really interesting. So this book is Cotton Moon by an author called Catherine Tracy. It is long out of print. Catherine Tracy, so far as I can tell, wrote definitely one other book, maybe 2. the one that she definitely wrote, which I think was called Swamp, I think I'm going to try and get hold of a copy of and read, because I thought this was very interesting. So I went into this expecting it to be a dodgy category romance. So it's published by in the UK by Cameo, who were a kind of smaller, like Mills and Boon competitor, publishing a wide range of different, romances. And when you look at the little ads at the back of the book, they are for doctor romances and things like that. So the kind of standard stuff you expect. This book came out in the UK in 68. And that, I think, is when it was originally published. So, published in the 60s. And it's a book about the American Civil War and the run-up to the American Civil War, set in Louisiana. And it focuses on a really poor family. So what I was expecting from this, from the back, was a romance between a young woman and a guy who is like a supervisor of slaves on a plantation, which is why, I say I expected it to be really dodgy. What you actually get is a much more complex book than that. So there is a relationship. There is that relationship at the heart of it. But it's not a normal, romance novel type relationship at all. It's not a particularly happy relationship. And certainly the central guy is absolutely appalling. He's a really horrible human being, violently racist, and just really, really awful. But he ends up with this young woman who is, not perfect by any means, but, not nearly as bad as him. And through the course of the book, they have a family, and the book follows the years leading up to the Civil War and then the years of the Civil War as well. So it's kind of like a family saga type book. It talks about, the children they have who grow to adulthood during the book. So it's that kind of family saga set against the backdrop of the Civil War and the end of slavery. So there is a lot of, really problematic content in this book about slavery. It uses some, quite racist tropes at times. But for all that, it was, I thought, an interestingly written book. Right from the start, I was gripped by it. I wanted to keep reading and find out what was going to happen. It was very engagingly written, but there was also always this sense of wanting to know what happened next, which I think is always the sign of a good novel. And it ended up being really quite moving at the end. The final line of this book was, I thought, really, really excellent. I can't tell you what it was because it would spoil things, but it was actually really well done. Problematic at times, definitely. Definitely it feels like a book written by a white woman in the 60s about, the subject I've talked about. So it wasn't particularly enlightened, but it was well written and interesting. So I'm really glad that I read this. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. Okay, moving on then. I read a celebrity memoir, and that is Carich by John Waters. So this was interesting, but a little bit disappointing. So this is John Waters' account of himself hitchhiking across America. So he goes from Baltimore to San Francisco, hitchhiking all the way. And the way the book is laid out is in 3 sections. So that the actual bit where he does the hitchhiking is the final third of the book. The first third and the middle third are him imagining what might happen. So the first third is like his best case of what might happen, and the middle section is his worst case of what might happen. And those parts are, as you would expect from a John Waters book, really imaginative, very funny, absolutely filthy, shocking and disgusting, but very, very entertaining indeed. The final third is actually a bit of a letdown after that, because the final third is, it's fine. So he hitchhikes across America. There's a few bits where he can't get a lift and he gets a bit wet in the rain, but basically it's fine. He meets some, completely ordinary but quite sweet and nice people, and it ends up being quite heartwarming. So it's a mix of absolutely filthy and quite sweet and heartwarming, but it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping it would be. After that then, I read a Sweet Valley High book. So I read the third of the Sweet Valley High books by Francine Pascal and Kate William, which was called Playing with Fire. This was really, really enjoyable. So the Sweet Valley High books, if you don't know, set in California at a high school and focus on 2 twins, Jessica, who's like the naughty twin, and Elizabeth, who's like the good, studious twin. And in this one, there's a boy called Bruce Patman, who Jessica has fancied since the beginning of the series, and she finally manages to start dating him. And he's awful. He's like clearly a horrible, horrible person. He's really terrible to her. And you know right from the start that that's what's going to happen. And a lot of the book is Elizabeth trying to break them up and this kind of sibling conflict as a result of that. But it was really, really entertaining. It ended exactly how you'd expect it to. But I had a great time reading it. It's really fun reading despicable male characters sometimes, I think. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. After that, some more non-fiction. So I read a 60s book, Coffee, Tea or Me, what's the subtitle? The Uninhibited Memoirs of Two Airline Stewardesses. So this is one of those books that was like a big, quite a big deal at the time. I think it sold millions of copies, both in the US and internationally. Nominally, or on the cover, it says it's by Trudy Baker and Rachel Jones, with, in small letters, Donald Bain. Bob Dice, one of my patrons and also one of the publishers of the fantastic Men's Adventure magazine, pointed out to me that actually it had become apparent more recently that Trudy Baker and Rachel Jones don't exist at all and never existed. It was all written by Donald Bain, who worked in the PR department at an airline. So this is a book that kind of cashed in on that glamour of like flying in the 60s, of kind of people like important businessmen and people like that and movie stars flying around America and internationally, and also that kind of mystique of airline stewardesses. So this book isn't as salacious as I thought it might be, but there's definitely some, entertaining, kind of slightly saucy detail, and some fun stuff about various celebrities that they claim to have flown with. Whether Donald Bain based this on interviews with actual stewardesses or just completely made it all up, I'm not sure. But it was a reasonably fun read. It wasn't quite as much fun as I hoped it would be, but it was decent enough. After that then, I read a book by one of the GarbAugust co-hosts, Regina Sinclair from Regina's Haunted Library, who is a published author as well. So I read her thriller Fashion Victims, which was really, really entertaining. So this is a novel set in like the high fashion world in New York, about a fashion designer who's preparing for his next big show, which he really needs to be a success. And in the background, basically, various people who are in different ways connected to him, people he knows through the fashion industry, are being murdered. And there ends up being a cop investigating the murders, and kind of a relationship forms between the central character and this cop. And I don't want to say any more than that because it would spoil it. But it was really, really entertaining. It's got the vibe of one of those kind of late 80s, early 90s erotic thrillers. So there's a lot of sex in this book. It was very, very rude at times, but really, really entertaining. The central mystery I thought was really well done. It was gripping, and it felt like it had that kind of verisimilitude about the fashion industry as well. I know now, clearly I'm someone, as you can probably tell, who knows nothing about fashion. Everything I know about fashion I gleaned from the TV show Ugly Betty. That's it. That's all I know about fashion. But this book felt like a kind of almost a bit of an insider's view. You felt like it was written by someone who knew about what they were writing about. So I really, really enjoyed it. It was gripping, it was saucy, it was fun. I definitely recommend it, particularly if you need something for the host recommendation square on the bingo card. It was a really entertaining read. After that then, I read Nick Carter, The Inca Death Squad, by Martin Cruz Smith. So all of these Nick Carter books, and this is a long-running series of kind of slightly saucy spy books written during the 60s and 70s in particular. So they never have the author's name on the cover, but this one was actually written by Martin Cruz Smith, who went on to write Nightwing, which is a pretty cool like vampire bat novel, and most famously Gorky Park and its many sequels. So I read Gorky Park recently and thought it was absolutely fantastic. So when I discovered that Martin Cruz Smith had written some Nick Carter books, I wanted to read one, and it was slightly disappointing in that it was exactly like every other Nick Carter book I've read. There wasn't anything particularly special about it. So in this one, Nick Carter goes to South America. He is working with the Soviets to take on some kind of revolutionaries over there. There's silly gadgets, there's sex, there's violence. It's very much a James Bond ripoff, but it was fun, and it's got a great photo cover as well. I love these cheesy old photo covers. So that was entertaining enough. After that then, so the final thing I finished this week It was a book I read for a buddy read with Mariah, one of my viewers. So she sent me a copy of this book a while ago and its sequel, and we read it together. So that was Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. So I don't know if you could see on the cover there, but it was based on the best-selling CD-ROM game, which dates it wonderfully. So this came out in the 90s, and it really felt 90s. So it's an occult detective style story about this guy in New Orleans who is a writer, but who is investigating these kind of voodoo murders. There's all sorts of, various different types of horror stuff going on. There's lots of puzzles he has to solve. You can tell it was based on a video game because there's all these bits where he's doing something that clearly the player in the video game would have had to do. But it was a really fun, kind of light, fluffy read. Definitely super 90s, but that side of it was really fun. So I had a really good time with that. I didn't say, did I? It was by Jane Jensen, who I think was the creator of the video game series as well. So yeah, that was fun. So that's everything I finished this week. As you can tell, it's been a very productive week of reading trash. I've got 3 things on the go at the moment. The final one of which is not trash. So the first of those is Rivals by Jilly Cooper, the other group read. So I'm listening to the audiobook of this. I'm about 10% in. It's really fun. So it's the kind of the sequel to Riders, but you don't have to have read Riders to read this. And it centres around the kind of world of commercial television in the UK in the 80s and kind of rivalry within that world. But it's got all the stuff you expect from a Jilly Cooper book. It's got lots of rich people having affairs with each other, lots of sex, and it's very silly but very entertaining. There was a hilarious bit where you can tell Jilly Cooper was not a person of the people, came from a slightly elevated background, because there's a bit where someone is going to a party and she's really disappointed because there's an opera on the radio that she wants to record, or she wants to listen to, and she's going to miss it because she's got to go to this New Year's Eve party. So she puts a 3-hour audio cassette into her radio in order to record the programme. Now, I don't know if anyone out there is aware that if there were ever 3-hour audio cassettes, but the longest I remember any of them being was 90 minutes. I think I may have seen some 2-hour ones at one point, but 90 minutes was certainly the norm. So how this lady managed to get 3-hour audio cassettes, I don't know. Clearly Jilly Cooper never used to tape stuff off the top 40 charts on a Sunday afternoon like I did. And I'm amazed though that none of her editors ever picked up on that. But anyway, that was a slight error in this book. But yeah, it's fun so far. I'm also reading a book which I did not have on my TBR for this month, but when I discovered it existed, I had to read it. I'm not sure if that was a wise decision or not, but it's quite interesting. So it's a book called Malibu Express by an author called Brad Carter. And if the name Malibu Express is familiar to you, you may not want to admit that it's familiar to you, but it's a movie. So this novel is a novelisation of a movie from the 80s by a director called Andy Sidaris. So Andy Sidaris directed a ton of movies, like at least a dozen, I think, that were kind of B-movie, like action thrillers, very low budget, but distinguished, if that's the right word, by the fact that they often had a lot of female nudity in them. So typically the female stars would be like Playboy playmates who were not shy about removing their clothing at various points during the film. His films are like really over the top, really silly, really fun, but definitely not the kind of film you would watch with your aging parents. So I did see, I must confess, a few of them back in the 80s and 90s, but always on my own, never with my parents. So they're fun films, and this novelisation is very true to the film. As a result of that, I'm not sure if it really worked. I'm not sure it quite works as a book because not having the visual element that you get in the film, you just end up with a very silly kind of mystery story. But I'm kind of having fun reading it anyway. And then the final thing that I'm reading at the moment, which as I said isn't trash, is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. So that's the Criminally book club pick for this month. and I'm really enjoying it so far. I've only read the first 2 chapters, but it starts with a bang. It's got some great characters. It's got action right from the get-go. I always find Cormac McCarthy's style of writing and his aversion to punctuation a little bit difficult, but I'm quite enjoying the book so far. So I expect to have finished that by the time we get to next week, and I will report back and let you know my final thoughts. So that is everything I've read this week. In terms of channel stuff, because I'm still kind of getting back into the swing of things, I'm not entirely sure what videos are going to go up next week. In the last week, though, you've had my review of The Big Head by Edward Lee. You had my September wrap-up, so everything I'd read in September, and you had my TBR for August. One video I have got filmed, which will definitely be going up in the week ahead, is an unboxing video for an Abominable Book Club box, but it's not a normal Abominable Book Club box. It's something slightly different, so watch out for that. I just realised that I forgot to go through the bingo card, which I promised to do. So let me go through that very quickly with you and tell you what I have ticked off. So Celeb memoir for the John Waters book, not a book for the pocket novel from People's Friend. Category romance, I've ticked off both for that pocket novel for from People's Friend, which definitely falls into that kind of romantic suspense subgenre of category romance, and also for Cotton Moon, which I thought was a category romance, even though it kind of wasn't. Non-fiction trash, I've ticked off for Coffee, Tea or Me. Novelisation or tie-in, I've ticked off for Robocop II. Killer Animals, I've ticked off for Zoo by James Patterson. Group read, I've ticked off Zoo by James Patterson. Novel by Celeb, the James Patterson and Bill Clinton book. Pseudonym for the Nick Carter book by Martin Cruz Smith. Young adult trash for Sweet Valley High book 3. Topical trash for Coffee, Tea or Me. Modern trash for, well, pretty much like half the books I read. So let's go with the James Patterson and Bill Clinton one for that. Men's Adventure for the Executioner book, Vintage Trash for Cotton Moon, and Host Recommendation for Fashion Victims by R. Sinclair. So yeah, you can tell I am using the same book more than once for some of these, but that's completely fine. So yeah, that's my progress against the Garbingo card so far. I think I've actually ticked off 15 of the squares. So yeah, I'm doing all right so far, and I'm pretty confident that I will manage to tick them all off before the end of the month. So anyway, I will leave it there. Do let me know in the comments what you've been reading for GarbAugust. Hope you've had as an enjoyable a week one as I have. Let me know if you are willing to, if you're a fan of Andy Sidaris movies. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.